So my original plan for this video was that it was going to be like my Halloween special, just because it's a haunter, and that's like spooky. But then it ended up being probably the scariest thing I've ever made, so I guess that's more on brand, but it's not what I wanted. I did a Sobble a few months ago, and I just wanted to paint more Pokemon stuff, but I had this idea to make like a shadow box with a haunter in it, and I thought it'd look really cool. And I had like a load of different foam core. I had some white foam core and some black foam core, and I was like, well, I will cut out the different like colours as individual layers, and I'd do that out of the white foam core and then paint it, and I'd make a frame out of the black foam core, and that'd be like the shadow box bit, and it'd look really cool. I'm going to spoil it a little bit. That does not work out. It actually goes really poorly. Turns out, cutting foam core was a hell of a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I did not anticipate how difficult it was going to be just to cut the foam core in a good way. At first, it looked like it was going okay. So what I did was I printed off some pictures of Haunter, just in black and white, because it's not like I really needed the colour. And then I stuck them to a piece of foam core, and then I cut around them. And I had multiple pictures of Haunter, because I was like, well, I'll need to cut out multiple versions of each layer. It ended up not actually being as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be. I ended up only needing 2, but it's not like it was a problem having more. Cut out all the pieces. Later on we'd be painting them all and then sticking them all together, and then we'd have a great thing at the end to look at. But yeah, so cutting them out actually turned out to be really difficult. At first, things seemed to be going fine. I cut around all the bits and everything was going okay. After I'd cut around all the initial bits, and it came to popping out the pieces from the rest of the foam core, I noticed none of the cuts had actually gone all the way through. What seems to have happened is that it had cut the top layer of card on foam core. If you're not sure how foam core is, essentially, it's like 2 pieces of cardboard with foam in the middle. It had cut through the first layer of card and then the foam core, but it hadn't cut through the back layer of card, so I had to recut everything again. For some reason that just ended up being really difficult. It did not want to work. So I kept getting like messed up pieces. I would cut a piece and it would like rip on the other side of it. The bigger pieces it wasn't such of a problem with, but the smaller pieces were actually really an issue, so I had to go through those multiple times. I ended up getting all the pieces I needed, but I wasn't totally happy with how they turned out. That started the sort of me not being happy with how things were going. After I had all the individual pieces cut out, the next thing to do was to cut the black foam core to use as the background and the walls and stuff. I ended up not doing any walls, because for some reason, I could not cut a straight line. I don't know why it wouldn't cut a straight line. You can see me use a metal ruler and slide my knife along the inside of the metal ruler, but it would not cut a straight line. Every single time I did it, the inside would go wavy. I don't know if that's to do with the foam core or that the knife was shit. The knife felt fine. It did feel a little bit loose. I tightened it up at one point, and that didn't seem to help. So I don't know. I thought cutting foam core was going to be a lot easier than it was, but it wasn't. And after struggling to cut out all the white pieces, I didn't have the patience to go through multiple times just trying to cut straight lines out of the black pieces, so I just gave up on the whole like shadow box thing, and it was just going to be a 3D picture, essentially. Like, I'd use the black as a background then, and then have just the different layers on top of it. I'd still like to do it as a shadow box at some point, but I don't know why it wasn't working, and until I can work out a better way of cutting foam core, I'm just going to leave it as like a flat thing. So the next thing to do was paint it. I learned this like cool trick for painting recently, where I've got those like silicone pop things, you know, the things that are kind of like bubble wrap, but just for messing with, and you can like pop them and then pop them back and it kind of feels like bubble wrap. But acrylic paint doesn't stick to silicone, so it means that all the little pops are actually really good for using as like a palette, and I had one of them lying around, so I figured I'd try it, and it worked really well. Of everything that I did during this process, that is probably my favourite thing. It's like the most ridiculous bit, but my favourite thing was how well that worked, because it made cleanup a lot easier, and I used less paint because I wasn't constantly topping up the paint that had like dried out when you have it on like a paper piece. But it then quite quickly went wrong again. I needed literally 4 colours to make a haunter. I need white, I need black, I need purple, and I need pink. Now the only issue is, I didn't have any purple or pink paints, and I was like, well, I understand how to mix colours. I'll just mix them. It'll be fine. It's not fine. It wasn't fine at all. It did not work. I don't know why. I mixed my first blue and red together and got brown. I don't really know why. I mixed a second load of blue and red together. There were like different shades of blue and red. I just had various that I tried mixing in different amounts and stuff. Second time I got brown, and then I just got angry and just left. And there's actually a bit where I just cut out where I just was gone for like half an hour while I just wandered around the house looking for other paints. luckily for me, I did find some other paints. I found some blue and some red poster paints, and those mixed together and gave me purple straight away. Why the first load of blue and red that I mixed together didn't give me purple, I don't know, but this load did. And then it was just a matter of mixing it with some white to get the different shades. None of them were pink, but one was a hell of a lot lighter than the other, which ended up quite a nice lilac-y colour. So I decided to use that for the mouth, which is usually pink, but it works. And then a second load, which I mixed, and it ended up being like a darker purple, and I figured I'd use that for the body. So that all worked really well. Once I had some paint mixed, the paint colours looked fine. Then the issue became actually painting, because the paint just did not want to stick to the card whatsoever. I could probably do multiple layers and stuff, but by this point in the process, I had been doing this for 2 or 3 hours, and it had taken way longer to do every single step, and every single thing just went wrong. I still was hoping for it to turn out okay at this point, and honestly it's fine, but it is also probably the scariest thing I've ever made. It looks ridiculous. I didn't realise just how ridiculous it looked, though, until I actually glued it all together. Because it's a 3D image, essentially, I needed to paint not just the flat surfaces, but I also needed to paint the edges of everything, which wasn't that big of a deal. It was a little bit awkward. I had to grip things in certain ways to, like, not smudge the paint constantly. But yeah, I just, like, painted around the edges of everything, which the foam took the paint pretty well. I actually thought the foam wouldn't take the paint. I thought the foam would, like, absorb the paint, so it'd end up looking really dull, and it didn't. It actually took the paint really well. It was the flat card surfaces that just smeared the paint all the time. I think it actually ends up, once it's dry, looking okay, but especially while I was doing it, I was just getting annoyed. Once all the pieces were painted, it was just a matter of letting them dry for a little bit, so I used that time to, like, go and wash up and tidy up. And then there was a little bit more cutting out to do. So I'd given up on making the edges of the frames, but what I hadn't given up on was it being a 3D thing. The way it was going to work was the body was going to go on, and then the mouth would go on the body, and the eyes would go on the body, but the hands needed to float. So I needed to make some stands for the hands. So what I did was I got some of the black foam core and cut little cubes out of that, and then stuck them on top of each other to make little towers, and then stuck the hands on top of the towers. And it looks a little bit goofy, but it works. And then it was just finally a matter of gluing everything in place. As soon as I put the body on the background, I was like, oh, actually, this looks okay. And then, immediately afterwards, everything went wrong, because I glued the eyes on, and I was like, wow, that is the goofiest shit I've ever seen. The bit where I went wrong is I painted the pupils on before I'd put them in place. And if I hadn't, and if I'd done it right, it would have been okay, but I kind of drew the pupils looking like a bit wonky, and it now makes it look incredibly fucking goofy. Like, I didn't want it to be terrifying, it was just a Haunter. Like, I drew Haunter because Haunter's one of my favourite Pokemon, but I didn't want it to look ridiculous, and that's kind of how it's ended up looking. So if you watched my last video, I made that dice tray, and I still wanted it to look like a shadow box, so I figured putting it in the dice tray would still give it that effect, so you could at least see what I was going for. And I did, and you can see that, and it looks better like that. I feel like if I'd have got the proper shadow box look, it'd be good, and like, I think it looks okay. When it's like fully like in 3D and you can see around it and it's like hands are coming out, I think it looks kind of good, but it also looks incredibly fucking goofy because of those eyes. I'm not happy with how it turned out, but I learned more how to do it, at least. I know at least where I need to put more effort in if I do this again, essentially. I don't know, the more I look at it, the less I dislike it. I just think it looks kind of funny more than anything. I had the Sobble on the table while I was doing this for like emotional support, and what I've actually ended up doing is I've put the Haunter on the back of the frame, like inside it. So one side is the Sobble and the other side is the Haunter, and it looks kind of cute like that. I can't put it on a wall now, but then again, I didn't have it on a wall in the first place, so it's not really a problem. I could just spin it around on my desk depending on which side I feel like seeing at the time. I like it. It's not great. It's not what I wanted, but it's not that bad. Special thanks to my patrons, Justin Wood, Hobbs, and Koopy Vegeta. You can join my patrons at patreon.com/Holden Gatsby, check out my TikTok and Twitter at Holden Gatsby, and follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Holden Gatsby. Don't forget to subscribe to all of my channels. If you want more, you can watch my last video now, but if not, then thanks for sticking around. Bye.